Hey, welcome back to METROspectives. I'm Alex Roman, executive editor for Metro Magazine. And my guest today is John Hanlon, CEO and co-founder of AlphaRoute. John, how's it going?
Excellent. Thanks a lot for having me, Alex. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining me. Really excited to talk to you about technology, AI, and paratransit. I think it's going to be a great conversation for our listeners and our readers. I wanted to start for those who aren't familiar with AlphaRoute, if you can walk us through the company's origin and what problems you set to solve and how that kind of shaped the platform you've built today.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Uh, I never get tired of talking about this story because it's a really unique backstory for us. I used to be the chief operating officer in Boston Public Schools, and our transportation budget was getting a lot of negative attention simply because it was just very, very high. And public
Mhm.
officials demanded that we save $10 million in transportation. And to be totally honest, that was, to me, one of those political statements that's not actually based in reality. It was more meant
Right,
for political gain.
right.
But there was a target on our back where we had to do something. And I was brand new to yellow bus routing and to transportation in general. I didn't know what to do. I don't know why they were looking at me. But what I did know is that we had a great team, really smart team, but a team that was doing the same thing year after year. So how can I shake that up a little bit? How can I try to make our system more efficient and hopefully save some money? What I did is I launched a public competition, basically a hackathon, to try to
Hmm.
find some smart people out there who could build more efficient bus routes for us. The thinking being that if our routing could be more efficient, we could take some buses off the road and save a lot of money. I got very lucky that MIT joined that competition. They built some routing algorithms that we applied that allowed us to reduce the size of our fleet by 50 buses, and we saved about $5 million. It was a really big success. And from there, the whole idea of AlphaRoute was born. Very quickly, we also adopted some MIT-based algorithms on the transit space as well. And so when we started our business, we started both in schools and in transit, developing further these MIT-based algorithms to produce some great gains in the public space.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I mean, this is how long ago? I'm sorry.
This is about 6 years ago when we started the business, and the
Okay.
hackathon itself was back in 2017 when I was still in Boston.
Yeah, so that's what I was kind of getting at. 2017, that's kind of before the real adoption of technology, I'm assuming in school bus, but as well as public transit.
For sure, yeah. And honestly, technology hasn't grown as much since then as you'd think. There's still a
Yeah.
lot of legacy providers out there. And in fact, one of our taglines as a business is don't let legacy software be your legacy, because too many of them are still sort of following the old modalities of things and not getting into the more cutting edge areas of AI and true optimization.
Yeah. Well, let's get to kind of at a high level, can you talk a little bit about how Alpha Route works and what makes your approach to transportation technology different from what's currently out there?
Sure. No, it's a great question. So, we are what I'd like to call an AI-powered software company
Hmm.
that provides um, really sophisticated tools for clients to solve their problems. One of the industry insiders whom I sort of look to as a mentor from time to time, I asked him one day, I said, "What do you think of AlphaRoute? Like, what do you think sets us apart?" And he said, there are a lot of companies out there that are product driven. And I've always found AlphaRoute to be solution driven.
Hmm.
And I loved that comment, Alex, because and this didn't come from me or my marketing team. I thought, geez, can I steal that?
Right.
Because to me, it's really what we're all about. Where I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, to be honest, but we're all about trying to find where are those pain points, where are those problems that industry is trying to solve, and how can we solve them for people in a way that's really customized? How can we provide real AI, real optimization within our tools, not just as marketing language, but as bona fide intelligent resources that customers can rely on to actually achieve whatever results they're trying to achieve. And as part of that, we provide a full suite of software. In the school bus space, we provide some software in the transit space. We provide some fantastic optimization tools to help people become more efficient in whatever way they are imagining in their operations, again, to solve the problems that they have in a really unique way.
And recently, what many are calling a groundbreaking tool, you released Alfie. Can you explain what it is, what it can do, and how customers are already putting it to use?
Sure. So as I've said already, we are an AI-based company, and what that's meant from day one is that we provide very sophisticated machine learning algorithms within all the work that we do, which again is a form of AI. But AI in the more modern sense, what people think about AI these days is things like ChatGPT and Google Gemini and
Mhm.
Claude. And that's what Alfie really is now. So Alfie is using generative AI, allowing people to type in plain language questions and get immediate results. The way we like to think of Alfie is, well, I'll say this, back to my days in Boston as a COO, I would have loved to have had a data analyst at my disposal who could run all sorts of charts and analyses and things like that, but we could never afford it.
Right.
And if we could, it was really hard to find the information that we were looking for because we're sitting on piles and piles of data. And that's
Mhm.
essentially what our customers are as well. Our customers are dispatchers and transit directors and others, and they don't frankly have the time to be digging through spreadsheets. They have tons of data, but how can they mine the insights out of that data? And that's what we really like to think of Alfie as a very high-powered AI based data analyst who's just always working for you. You can ask simple questions like what routes were our worst in terms of on-time performance last year? How has ridership changed month to month on route number 12 over 2026? Ask all sorts of plain language questions like that, and it gives you those immediate results. Oftentimes with charts, with reports, with further analyses, it does some extra insight generation for you as well. And one of the things we're most excited about at Alfie right now, Alex, is that we're about to build in optimization tools into Alfie. So that's not
Mhm.
just getting data for you and reporting it back. It's actually running very, very sophisticated optimization models to help you to be more efficient as much as you possibly can. The last thing that I'd say about Alfie, and this is part and parcel with who we are as a company in general, we try to provide solutions to clients that don't require them to rip off everything else that they're doing just to transition to some new resources that we provide.
Mhm.
What I mean by that in terms of Alfie is it can sit on top of whatever you're currently doing. And that's the same for all of our solutions, all of our software. We try to provide it to customers in as much of an a la carte sort of way as we can, because we know that ripping out your software and replacing it with something else is very, very time intensive, very costly, and quite frankly, a headache. We'd love for people to use our software, but if they're not able to, but they want to use Alfie, then here, go ahead and use this as a standalone feature.
Hmm. Interesting. And you've touched on it. I mean, AI and automation, being a big key to AlphaRoute's long-term vision. What opportunities are you most excited about as the technology continues to evolve? I mean, obviously, not only that, but also, how do you see the transit industry kind of embracing that in technology as it evolves?
Sure. I mean, let's face it, right? AI is here to stay. I think that at this point, the question isn't if, it's when and how much and how soon and who's going to be doing it and et cetera, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is just trying to harness that technology and put it in people's hands to maximize it for as much as they possibly can. For us, as we sort of look through that crystal ball and think, what's coming down the pike, one of the things we talk about as a team sometimes is, it's quite likely that within a few years, Alfie will be the software. Alfie will
Hmm.
be able to do everything for you. You wouldn't need this module and that module and that module. It's just a simple matter of a very basic interface, asking it to do what you need it to do, and then boom, it gets it done. What I do want to be clear on, though, as I bring up that point, is we're also very, very mindful of the human element here. And we
Hmm.
want to make sure that we're providing Alfie as a tool in partnership with the people we're working with, not as this complete AI takeover, if you will, that some people are a little bit fearful of, and rightly so. One quote I'll share with you from a customer we got about a year and a half ago, and this really is a big theme of who we are as a business. We were having a regular meeting with one of our bigger clients, and the client stopped the meeting about halfway through and just sort of again stopped the meeting in its tracks and asked, sorry, and said to me and two of my colleagues, he said, we've worked with a lot of vendors over a lot of years. No one understands our job better than you do.
Hmm.
And why do I bring that up in terms of an answer with a question about AI? I bring that up because we will still always be about that human element and still always be about understanding what our clients' problems are and then trying to harness AI, not to do away with the human element, but to provide that AI resource to go hand in hand with that human element to allow them to get as much done as they possibly can, as easy as they possibly can, to then free up their time to do many, many other things. So, for example, some of the work that we've done in transit is freeing up work for dispatchers to actually do their day jobs and not worrying about some of the more mundane tasks that AI can do for them.
Great. And that's just a great answer. I think, obviously that I think eases the technology adaption, right? Adoption, with people knowing that if there's an issue in the startup, there's an issue in the process, there's an issue anywhere down the line, your team's going to be able to interface with them and fix that.
Absolutely.
Great. And shifting gears a little bit, just kind of looking at the industry in general, paratransit, a notorious complex and expensive space. What are the biggest operational challenges providers are facing today, and how is AlphaRoute helping address those?
Sure. So, yeah, talk about a complex space. I mean, my goodness, it's hard to imagine a more difficult public space to work in than paratransit
Mhm.
because A, it's incredibly complex, as you mentioned. B, the cost pressures are through the roof. C, those cost pressures are happening in a world where people have less and less money to work with. And D, let's face it, the work that they're doing is so incredibly valuable. In many cases, these paratransit trips involved providing just everyday services for people with disabilities. I mean, how can it be more valuable than that, right? So,
Right.
um, incredible. So, just on the surface, it's already very challenging, right? One of the challenges that we've spent a lot of time focusing on is in regards to how paratransit agencies use non-dedicated service providers. And that's definitely one of the challenges that, to me, doesn't get talked enough about, but it's certainly a big part of the everyday problems that most major transit agencies are trying to solve. And what I mean by this is they know full well that they're not going to have their fleet capacity set up in a way to handle all of their peak demand and the demand curve through the year. And so they're always going to rely on non-dedicated service providers, taxis, rideshare companies, et cetera. But it's sometimes taken for granted how they go about doing that. And could
Mhm.
there be a better way? And what we found, again, using MIT-based algorithms that we've brought out to the market, is yes, in fact, there is a better way. There's a much, much smarter way to choose which trips you outsource, which trips you keep in-house. Let's face it, the economic model between what you do in-house versus outsource is very different. And if you can be really smart about which trips you outsource, you can actually save tons of money. So the MBTA here in Massachusetts, a client of ours,
Mhm.
we would save them $5 million dollars a year and optimize more than 1 million trips a year
Wow.
simply by being really efficient and smart about how you're outsourcing those trips. And again, that's just a small part of the overall world of paratransit,
Mhm.
but it's definitely to me one of the bigger challenges that we've been able to show is very easily solvable if you have the right tools.
Right. Well, great. And I guess staying on the topic of paratransit agencies, balancing costs and pressures against need to deliver a high quality experience for riders who depend on the service. How is Alpha Route helping do that, and how are you seeing operators kind of do that in today's environment?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a great question to follow up on from the last question because that's another huge challenge, right? So many people are, because of those cost pressures we talked about before, they're really trying to balance efficiency with service. And in many cases, in trying to provide A, they're losing out on B, meaning they're trying to become more efficient and they're losing out on the customer experience.
Right.
To me, though, and to all of us at AlphaRoute, that's a bit of a fallacy, right? So what we've been able to show people is you can actually have it both ways. And in
Mm.
fact, you not just want to have it both ways. It's not just true that you can have it both ways. It's actually true that if you have better efficiency, you will have a better customer experience.
Right.
Because think of it, right? In many cases, if a customer is not having a good experience, it's because that operation wasn't as efficient as it should have been, where the trip beforehand ran late because it wasn't routed correctly, or the agency wasn't able to predict shifts in demand correctly enough to be able to provide that great service that they needed for the next day, or they weren't efficient enough to offset the driver shortages that came up that day, which then led to bad results for their customers. What we found through these optimization models we provide to the market is it's not just about optimizing for cost. It's actually about optimizing for both. And that's a great thing for me to emphasize just once more, because as we're out and about talking to people in trade shows and conferences and in the media, people often ask, well, can you go too far in terms of optimizing for cost where
Hmm.
people don't have a good experience? And that's not what it is. People oftentimes equate optimization with something related to cost, and that just doesn't compute. Optimization is about whatever you want to optimize for. And
Right.
if you have your models set up the right way, it's not just optimizing for one thing, it's optimizing for sometimes several different things all in parallel with each other. And so, as we're helping districts and transit agencies to think through that great dilemma you brought up about efficiency versus service, it's actually about optimizing for both and delivering both.
Great. Well, John, I really appreciate the time. Is there anything, final thoughts, anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so. It just, if anyone's ever interested in the kind of thing that we can do, feel free to look us up at www.alpharoute.com. Happy to have a conversation. And as I said earlier on, I know it does come across sounding a little bit cheesy, I'll be honest, but we love hearing about people's problems and then building tools that'll enable them to solve those problems.
Great. John, I appreciate your time.